Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So it's quite an amazing chapter that we are studying. If I can get it on my screen for you. Chapter, let's see. Canto 10, chapter 60. I have too many things open here, looks like. There we go, that's the problem. Okay. There we go. I assume you can see that now?
Yes.
All right. Okay, in verse 10, I'll read the Sanskrit for this one. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Raja Putrip Sita Bhupayar Lokapala Vibhutibi Mahanubhavai Srimadhi Rupau Darya Balorjitai. The Supreme Lord said, "My dear princess, you were sought after by many kings as powerful as the rulers of planets. They were all abundantly endowed with political influence, wealth, beauty, generosity, and physical strength." As you go through this whole chapter, you can focus on many things, but one recommendation is to focus on the subtlety of communication between Krishna and Rukmini, and the beauty of it, and the even seemingly Krishna misreading the room, as we say, seemingly, of course, because he's the Supreme Lord. He's a pretty good communicator. Okay, whoops. Text 11. Since your brother and father offered you to them, why did you reject the king of Chedi and all those other suitors who stood before you, maddened by Cupid? Why instead did you choose us, meaning him, me, who are not at all your equals? Here Krishna is saying he's not the equal of Rukmini and not even the equal of Shishupal. Terrified of these kings, lovely browed one, we took shelter in the ocean. We have become enemies of powerful men, and we practically abandoned our royal throne. So I'm a coward. Why did you choose me? Krishna says, as a husband. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti comments on this verse as follows. The quote, the Lord's mentality here can be understood as follows. When I gave Rukmini a single flower from the heavenly Parijata tree, Satyabhama showed such a torrent of fury that I could not pacify her even by bowing down at her feet. Only when I gave her a whole Parijata tree was she satisfied. Rukmini, however, did not display any anger even when she saw me give Satyabhama the whole tree. So how can I enjoy the nectar of angry words from this wife who never feels jealousy, who is supremely sober, and who always speaks pleasingly? Thus considering, the Supreme Lord decided, quote, if I speak like this to her, I will be able to provoke her anger. Good luck with that, Krishna. This is how some authorities explain Krishna's speech to Rukmini. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Hare Krishna. One time in Tokyo in 1972, there were some ISKCON was going through somewhat of a tumultuous time at that time, and Srila Prabhupada was dissatisfied with some of his leadership. So one of his disciples, Burijan Prabhu, bought Prabhupada a ring, a gold ring, and he engraved in it Jai ISKCON. in his innocence, he was trying to encourage Prabhupada. So he gave Prabhupada that ring, and Sudama Prabhu was massaging Prabhupada one day in Tokyo, And there was just three people in the room: Burijan Prabhu, who gave the ring, Srila Prabhupada, and Sudama. And Sudama noticed the ring and said, Prabhupada, you have a new ring. And Prabhupada said, yes. And Sudama asked, Prabhupada, who gave you that ring? And when he asked that question, Prabhupada kind of just looked up with a very soft facial expression and was just looking at Burijan Prabhu. And then Sudama repeated, he said, Prabhupada, who gave you that ring? And Prabhupada, again looking at Burijan Prabhu, said, oh, someone. So Prabhupada could have said, oh, it was Burijan Das. No, but he just said, oh, someone. And in this way, he totally melted Burijan Prabhu's heart as they had this intimate kind of secret between the two of them. So communications, the subtlety of communication can be so powerful. Krishna actually even says it's in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, or the 11th canto, that his heart is won over by indirect communication. It's called, does anyone know Aroksha? I have to check to get the Sanskrit right. And so here Prabhupada is showing that. So communication and the subtlety of communication is so important for us as devotees, naturally, as those who are trying to share Krishna consciousness with others and associate with our God siblings. Communication, and there's many purposes to communication. One of them is just transactional, to get things done. Pick me up at the airport. The cost of the Bhagavad Gita is $10, et cetera, et cetera. They can be very much related to bhakti, but just getting things done. And then conveying knowledge, right? Quoting Bhagavad Gita verse, Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam Yome Bhakti Payachati, that Krishna accepts even a meager offering if it's made with devotion. And what we're going to probably focus more on this morning is communication as human connection. And as we saw in the example in Tokyo, of increasing affection. So Prabhupada, Krishna talks about the austerity of speech in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 17th chapter, verse 15, where he says, austerity of speech consists of speaking, and I'm going to focus on these two words, truthfully and beneficially, and in avoiding speech that offends. One should also recite the Vedas regularly. So truthfully, it should be truthful, honest, and beneficial. And I would almost say it should be generally truthful and almost always beneficial. And so let me explain a little bit about that, that saying generally truthful. Because one thing that we see a lot in the world, in practically every politician who says pretty much anything, but also in our society, that we sometimes will quote something that is true but not complete, right? Like, for example, we may quote a letter that Prabhupada wrote in 1974. The Varnashram system is for convenience sake in the material world. It has nothing to do with spiritual life. Always remember that Varnashram life is a good program for material life, and it helps one in spiritual life. But spiritual life is not dependent upon this. Now, all that is totally true. And at the same time, a person, especially a devotee who is familiar with Prabhupada's sayings, will know Prabhupada said other things about Varnashram at other times. So just quoting that without saying, for example, in the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada writes, the Varnashram Dharma mentioned here is essential for human civilization. So things can be true, but not complete. And of course, we know, every politician is a fact checker. Sometimes it's just an all-out lie, or sometimes it's just a half truth, or something like that. So also sometimes, we can speak something that's true but not beneficial. Okay. Well, Krishna is kind of giving us the example here in his speech to Rukmini, because she gets really upset at one point. Well, I don't want to, spoiler alert, I don't want to give away the chapter. And we could also, you know, a new person comes to the temple, and we, some tell them that they should just surrender everything, quit their job, and just surrender to Krishna, because Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita, Sarva Dharmam Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. And that's true, but is it beneficial? So it's very important to understand this topic of our speech and our communication being beneficial. Um, in 1966 or 67, Srila Prabhupada was asked about, uh, about the happiness of bhakti. And he said, it's like an ocean of LSD. So is that actually true? Is it like an ocean of LSD? Well, but was that something that the person he was communicating to could relate to? Right? Or a really amazing example is um, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita with Magrari the hunter. And, Narada Muni is walking down the path, and he sees all these half-dead animals. And I mean, we could get into a whole discussion about this whole pastime is amazing, and there's so many lessons there, but we'll just focus on one. And he sees these animals in pain, half dead, and he goes off the path to find the hunter, which is a dangerous thing to do, by the way. First of all, he's a moving entity, and the hunter could mistake him for an animal. And also, if you know anything about jungles, and what to speak of jungles in India thousands of years ago, going off a path, you could meet all kinds of interesting living entities that could be dangerous. But he does that out of compassion, and he finds the hunter. And what instruction does he give the hunter? He doesn't immediately say, just, what is his hunting? You should be a vegetarian. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. No, he asks him to fully kill the animals, not half kill them, fully kill the animals. So if someone was giving a Bhagavatam class today and said, we should just fully kill animals, right? Out of context, that would be completely, everyone would leave the class right away. So, but Narada, understanding the nature of the person he's speaking to, and what is the next step in bringing him closer to Krishna, says, okay, the next step would be at least put them out of their misery, kill them completely. That's your dharma as a hunter. So if your dharma is to be a hunter, at least kill them completely. So in this way, ultimately beneficial, but just having him take just the very next step in his progress. So again, pretty amazing there. Or in again, early, probably 1968, one devotee was just becoming interested in bhakti in Buffalo, New York. And, I don't know, well, yeah, and for my generation, which was a little younger than that, but only a little, I was 10 years old in 68. We were all very into having record collections. I don't know what these days people have. I don't know what they have, because they download everything from Spotify or whatever, or listen on Spotify. But records was like the thing, and you'd go to somebody's house and you'd compare records, and of course the record cover art was hugely important, etc. So they were talking about records, and Rupanuga Prabhu, who was this great, he's in Alachua now, but this great preacher who just brought so many important devotees to Krishna consciousness in Buffalo. So he said, that's okay. If you have a record collection, great. You can listen to Krishna conscious records. And so the person said, "Oh, wow," and actually he ended up selling all of his records. And they said, "Okay, where are the Krishna conscious records?" He said, "Well, we have one." So at first the devotee felt a little changed up, but actually he played that record again and again and again and again and listened to it. So beneficial, truthful, beneficial, yes. Now that doesn't mean we can tell any stupid lie, as we sometimes weren't always truthful on some kirtan in the 70s. But the point is saying things that are relevant to people so that they can come closer to Krishna. And, always thinking, what is the next step in bringing someone closer to Krishna? And Krishna doesn't, he has an interesting communication in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, verses 8 to 12, where he says, like we sometimes say, okay, just forget about it. Just surrender everything and just love me. Then he says, but if you can't do that, then do sadhana bhakti. And if you can't do that, then cultivate knowledge. And if you can't do that, at least be a good person, basically. Um, wanting eventually to bring that person to full surrender, or Arjuna in this case, in the Bhagavad Gita. But he gave that menu. So great communications. So what can we do? Well, one thing we can do is we can look for the beautiful and subtle communications that we find in the scriptures. It's everywhere if you look for it. We all know this. We've all experienced this. If you're thinking of buying a new car, you see cars everywhere. If you think of buying a watch, you notice everyone's watch, right? You focus on those things that are in the forefront of our consciousness. So one thing we might do when we're reading the Shastra is to focus on the communication and the beauty of it, and the beauty of it. One thing that comes to mind is the first canto, 13th chapter of the Bhagavatam, where Vidura, in the beginning, he just arrives, right, from being on pilgrimage for so many years. And he arrives back because he had been unceremoniously kind of kicked out of the Kaurava dynasty, practically speaking. He comes back and the Pandavas greet him. They have this beautiful greeting. And he's so soft-hearted in terms of dealing with these devotees, the Pandavas, that he's afraid to even tell them some bad news. And he avoids it, and the dealings are so sweet. And then later in the chapter, and that was out of affection and what was beneficial for the Pandavas. But then later in the chapter, right, he sees his brother Dhritarashtra, and he's so heavy with him. He said, "You're like a household dog, eating the remnants of food thrown to you by Bhima, who killed all your 100 sons. Your liver is defective. You've been blind from birth. Your kidney's not." Did I say liver? Whatever, liver or kidney? I can't remember which one. Right? Just get out of here. It's so embarrassing that you're living like this. Just get out of here. And that was beneficial for Dhritarashtra. So he adjusted so expertly his communication according to the time, the place, and the circumstance. I just read this yesterday and I thought it was very interesting. I still have to think about the purpose behind it completely, but we were reading in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the story of Shakshi Gopal and the older Brahmana who promised the younger Brahmana his daughter and all this. And then he sort of semi-reneged on it because of his the older Brahmana, because his son and wife were so upset with him. So then the younger Brahmana says he calls all of the village people, and he says that this gentleman has promised to hand over his daughter to me, yet now he does not follow his promise. Please ask him about his behavior. So he doesn't, I thought this was really fascinating. He doesn't ask him directly. He says, village people, please ask him about his behavior. Subtle communication. And then I was thinking about the exchange in the Chaitanya Charitamrita between Lord Nityananda and Advaita Acharya when Advaita Acharya is serving him prasadam, and it's a mountain of prasadam. The description is incredible. And Nityananda, jokingly says, I was hoping to break my fast, but there's hardly a morsel of food here. And Advaita says, be quiet. You're just a reject Paramahansa. And they're having this beautiful joking banter, as we would sometimes do with friends of ours, right? Or in a more sober point, Haridas Thakur and his communication with Lord Chaitanya, when he's saying that he's asking Lord Chaitanya benediction that he doesn't have to see his final pastime of leaving this world. And he's begging Lord Chaitanya that he allow him, Haridas Thakur, to leave the world first. And the beauty, subtlety of that communication. So it's everywhere. It's everywhere in the Shastra. Examples of really beautiful, beneficial, heartfelt communication. Then what can we do as devotees where communication is so important? One thing is we can really develop our subtle intelligence, our subtle communication, learn to tune into people, become readers of time, place, and circumstance. We weren't, excuse me, we weren't always like that. We sometimes really, I can say for myself as a young devotee, I really misjudged time, place, and circumstance sometimes, and learn as we're talking to someone to set aside our ego and our thoughts, what I'm going to say next, and really listen, really develop and empathically listen. In the 6th chapter, Krishna says that he is a perfect yogi who, by comparison to his own self, sees the true equality of all beings, both in their happiness and their distress. So first thing is to become a good listener. Prabhupada wrote this beautiful letter to Balavanta Prabhu in 1972. It was about sharing Krishna consciousness on college campuses. And he gives the example of Lord Chaitanya, who sat for 7 days listening to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya speak incorrect philosophy, and Lord Chaitanya didn't say a thing. Or Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita in the 1st chapter, letting Arjuna speak his mind, although he was speaking from not from the spiritual level, and patiently waiting. And then, later, kutastam kashmalamidam and asochanam asochastam. Then he starts actually, correcting Arjuna, but not after first developing that rapport by listening. And Prabhupada in that letter, he says that, yes, they're a little puffed up, but that's all right. They deserve it. So he understood college students in America, they may be a little proud, but they have this karma. They have good karma. And he said, later in the letter, he says, by appreciating their point of view. So we think about, college students in the 1970s, their point of view was basically, drugs, sex, rock and roll, and Mayavad philosophy, basically. Yet he said, by appreciating their point of view, gradually they will come to join us. So being a good listener, being empathic, and then, and the listening, it's like if you imagine going to a doctor and the doctor doesn't, take a, look in your mouth, say, ah, or, bang your knees, or these days do a blood test or take an x-ray or anything. He just immediately starts writing a prescription. Right? You wouldn't have too much faith in that prescription. But sometimes before we give some Krishna conscious thoughts, we don't listen to the person. We don't do any diagnosis before prescribing. And therefore, lots of times our speaking is more like a shotgun than a laser, right? A shotgun, shoots out lots of little shrapnel, and it kind of like, you close your eyes and you shoot some Krishna conscious philosophy, and hopefully it affects the person's heart. But when we listen to the person, see what their nature is, then we, out of this vast volume of bhakti understanding, we can take that part which will help that soul, or at least our best guess at that. So, reading the room, um, even reading people's body language. Body language is 55% of communicating emotionally, understanding people's emotions is by observing their body language. There's a famous study on that. Lord Chaitanya, one time he was really displeased that Sanatana Goswami had this fancy chadar shawl that was given to him, because he was a renunciate, he shouldn't have that. And Lord Chaitanya didn't say anything to him. I don't know if you remember, he just kept looking at it, and he kept looking at it. And Sanatana Goswami got the hint, right? And he went to the river and he exchanged it for a torn shawl that a poor person had. A poor person actually at first thought he was just, making fun, and why would you do that? But he actually did that. So, you know, um, developing our subtleties in communication, it requires a good dosage of the mode of goodness. Mode of passion is we want to, get our point across, and that's our main concern, rather than compassion, rather than rather than taking the time to listen. We're thinking of what we're going to say next, praying to Krishna and developing this refined intelligence. I'll end by talking about refinement. I had the fortune of Jamuna Devi. She lived in my house in Vrindavan for a little over a month. And sometimes she would cook every day, but sometimes she would cook for us. She would invite us over for a meal, my wife and I. And I guess my son was about 1 or 2 at the time. She kept on calling him Brahmin boy. But the quality of the prasadam that she cooked was just out of this world. And it wasn't out of this world like, as I usually like it, just swimming in sour cream and butter and, garanga potatoes. Just, you can barely see the potatoes through like that. Of course, that's also wonderful. But it was so subtle. That was just the word that came to my mind. And so light. And when she was serving the prasadam, she would explain what each prep was, and she would say it with such bhakti. And practically, I've never had this experience before, but it was practically digested as as I was eating it. It was because it was so light and subtle and infused with bhakti. Mm. So if we can kind of sometimes, think of Jamuna's cooking and apply that to our sharing Krishna consciousness and our, sharing bhakti with others, I think we will be really successful. Oh, by the way, I remembered it was parokshavad. That paroksha was the word of subtle, indirect, by the way. We can be really very successful in spreading Krishna consciousness. So, questions, comments, thoughts? I was told to leave 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, well, here's a question in the chat. What does ideal communication between guru and disciple look like? Brilliant question. I think the answer is it depends, because guru and disciples are individuals, and you have your nature and your guru has his or her nature. So it depends. One thing, I like to say this, and at first people think I'm being offensive, but then I explain myself and I don't think I'm being offensive. They don't think I'm being offensive anymore. But there's a few things that Prabhupada couldn't teach us, because, for example, he couldn't teach us how to deal with teenagers, because there were no, or at least people born of devotees. Maybe some devotees joined as teenagers, that's another thing. But 13, 14, 15-year-olds, because there weren't any teenagers. All the children in ISKCON at the time when Prabhupada were very young. he also couldn't teach us how to deal with disciples when they were in their 50s and 60s or older, because we were all quite young. I think I remember when somebody said that one of the young devotees was 30. I was shocked. 30. Oh my God. We used to wear buttons in the 60s saying, don't trust anyone over 30. Right. And then I remember Satsvarup Maharaj wrote a Back to Godhead article, at the end, one of those editorials on turning 40. I said, 40? Oh my God. So the relationship between guru and disciple may also change over the years. In 1976, Prabhupada wrote to a devotee in New Zealand. He said, now you're an older disciple. I cannot order you anymore. I can only request you. Please shave your head every fortnight. Right. So even Prabhupada adjusts. And if you see the way he treated Satsvarup Maharaj, Kirtananda, and others was sometimes different than the younger devotees. So it really depends. And in the seventh canto of the Bhagavatam, it says that the spiritual master is a friend. But obviously, at other places, it says that one takes the order of the spiritual master as one's life and soul, and is and in other places, Prabhupada even writes that one has to be it can be dangerous to be too close to the spiritual master, because one might just think of the spiritual master as an ordinary person, because they also have to go to the bathroom, and they also may burp after taking prasadam, and they also might, quote a verse wrong or something like that. Right? And you say, oh, right. And Prabhupada spoke to Jayadvaita Swami about this. He wasn't a Swami then. I think he was a brahmachari. Yeah, he was a brahmachari at the time. And Prabhupada, Jayadvaita Swami said, sometimes we see that you quote a verse, you quote a verse incorrectly, or this or that. And Prabhupada explained to him that the perfection of the spiritual master is not that he doesn't make any, mistakes like that, but that he's dedicated to the service of Krishna. So, what should the relationship be? Certainly, it should be one of Prabhupada writes, one should take the order of the spiritual master as one's life and soul. Matter of fact, that was the inspiration for Prabhupada leaving India and coming to New York. He said that he read the Tika, the commentary by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur of chapter 2, verse 41, Vyavasayatmika buddhir eke hakurunandana. That one should have, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that one takes the order of the spiritual master as one's life and soul. He says there that whether the material world exists or gets blown up, that blowing up is my adjusting, but whether it exists or not, or whatever happens in the world, the disciple's fixation is on the spiritual master's instruction. So I hope that was helpful in answering that. I'm trying to I didn't look at the chat during the class. So is there any other questions there? Or I think someone has their hand up. Well, they did have their hand up.
Bhima Prabhu had his hand up.
And then he took it down. But he's back.
Hari Bol Prabhu. It's always very nice. Hari Krishna. It's always very nice to listen to your classes. It's like free therapy. Like I didn't have to go pay $70 an hour to hear the things I need to hear.
$70, that's cheap.
Yeah. Well, it shows you how long it's been since I've ever talked to one. And the first time over that I have better things to do. Anyways, I just like to thank you for your class, and that Prabhupada gave us very short, memorable maxims that allow us to always remember how we should behave in any given circumstance. And the one that I always appreciate, because I need to always remind myself of this, being not of this nature naturally, which is you will know you will know my disciples because they will be gentlemen, perfect gentlemen and gentlewomen. And, that's all it takes. And because we all kind of inherently know what a gentle person is. And Prabhupada, even in the movements, even in his physical movements, in his speech, though sometimes he could be as fierce as the lion, he was always very gentle with his disciples and always gentle in his responses to any given situation or challenge. And through that gentleness, a great power is sort of revealed, and that is, of course, letting Krishna's will shine through, and also the truth, because Prabhupada always spoke the truth, whether it seemed in deference, different from a previous thing that he said. According to time and circumstance, it was true for the moment.
Right.
And that really endeared a lot of people to Prabhupada because of the magic of his spontaneity, his ability to instantly seize up a certain situation, and also a lot of mystical instances where people would come with some great question. I remember when I first came to the movement, being a philosophy minor and a creative writing major, the result of that was to have a challenging nature. And when I met Radhanath Maharaj, and I was just visiting the cottage that was the temple at that time, I had a lot of personal time with him, and I wasn't challenging in a negative way, but I was always presenting things that I had doubts about. And but the majority of times, because he wouldn't take questions until after class was done, during the class and during his purport to the class, and I noticed this, of course, obviously with Prabhupada, that my questions were answered, that I had, my specific questions that I had not voiced yet were answered by the verse that was read, the purport that Prabhupada made, and then, of course, the commentary of Maharaj. And also, I find that true today, like with yourself, with your good self. I wake up in the morning and, Prabhupada said, or I heard it said, that when you're a pure devotee, what a pure devotee means. Somebody asked, I can't remember whether it was Prabhupada, but what is a pure devotee? And the answer was, you have no more doubts anymore about Krishna. You have no more doubts. And one of those things that alleviates our doubts is to understand that if we truly have a sincere question or doubt, that if we are sincere in our endeavor to try to understand Krishna and Krishna consciousness, that Krishna will give us the answer through his devotees. And sometimes, of course, serendipitously, if we're not around other devotees and we have a great question, we don't need to go to the index in Prabhupada on Vanapedia and look up the exact quote on any given question. But serendipitously, sometimes we'll find ourselves opening up a Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita and reading a purport. This happens to me all the time, and it's one of the strongest panaceas to my doubts, which is all of a sudden I will read one line in a purport, especially the purports from Prabhupada, and that line will answer my question or support, my weakness, So I just wanted to say that I also get that from your classes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. So as you were talking, I was thinking of, I was thinking while you were talking, what I said we shouldn't be doing. But how another example of Prabhupada's speech bringing out affection when he was, just about to leave this world, and one of the devotees was, and he was still translating and commenting on the Bhagavatam, and the devotee was holding the microphone, and Prabhupada looked at him with affectionate eyes and said, "This is a very special microphone. You have to insert in mouth for it to work." So he was chastising him, but in such an affectionate way. And Prashant asks a question here with, but the speech, if time permits, but the speech laws of true beneficial can be broken for greater good. Well, that was my point. True beneficial, I don't think is ever broken. Truth is can be a relative. Like that time, Prabhupada was at a Indian person's home with his disciples, and there was onions in the prasad, and the devotees were saying, "Prabhupada, there's onions in the prasad." Prabhupada said, "No, there's not." No, there is onions. He said, Prabhupada said, "No, there's not. Eat it." And so, at that time, that place, that circumstance, Prabhupada chose not to, offend or have the host feel bad about the situation. And now at another time, he might have said, he might have done something different, and that's what it means according to time, place, and circumstance. He chastised Cardinal Danilou in France, and he later told Yogeshwar Prabhu, who was a translator from French to English, that I could smell the breath. I could smell the alcohol on his breath, right? And then another time in Australia, he was with some Christian priests, and he wanted to show them a newspaper article about Rath Yatra, and the man said, "Oh, I left my glasses in the car," and Prabhupada said, "Here, you can use mine." And the man put them on. He said, "Oh, they're perfect prescription." And Prabhupada said, "Yes, birds of a feather." So in that case, he said, so he saw something different in that. So of course, Prabhupada's intelligence was incredibly subtle. What it happens? Oh, me too. Yeah. And then I was reading here. What is the quality of speech in goodness, passion, ignorance? Please elaborate. Well, in that 17th chapter, it's talking about austerities of speech. It doesn't divide them, but I think we can pretty much figure out ignorance, because it is mentioned elsewhere in the Gita. I'm just not remembering the exact verse. But insulting to others, that would definitely be a beautiful mode of ignorance thing. So we can see how social media is definitely can help people develop the mode of ignorance in terms of how often people will insult one another without thinking much of it, right? Passion. Well, like I gave one example of thinking what we're going to say next and how we're going to impress people by our speech. It's all about me, right? Whereas bhakti it's all about Krishna, and I'm my only goal. So let's take it to a level of bhakti, making sure that our communication is anyabhilashita sunyam, free from other desires other than favorably serving Krishna, that is the main verse in the whole Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, is to make other desires zero. Then he explains what they are: desires for karma, for myself, looking out for number one, impersonal Mayavad conceptions, and anything else, and then anukulyena, favorably serving Krishna according to his desire, and that is a definition of uttama, or first class bhakti. And I believe our time is up for today. So thank you.
Very Prabhu. Wonderful class. Very subtle, very shastric, very funny. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasinduvevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. Thank you for the opportunity, Ananda Vihari Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. I'm staring at Henry Prabhu's shirt. It's very fancy. You should exchange it to an older one.
Yeah, you should give it to me.
Yeah.
Actually, talk about austerity speech. Henry was brought up as a real Paka Episcopalian, kind of royalty kind of. So he teaches me a lot about etiquette by staying at his house, because he actually has the this etiquette down very nice. By the conch shell.
Jai Shri Shri Radha Muladhar Shri Guru Chandra Ki Jai. Damodar Priya, who's on the couch with you?
This is my dear friend Leslie, who's visiting from Oregon. And we went to, all three of us went to Mangarati this morning.
Wonderful. Welcome, Leslie. Is she staying with you, Damodar Priya?
We tried to have her stay longer, but she could only stay for a day. Next time we'll grab her for longer.
And you should have a pillow fight.
What'd you say?
You should have a pillow fight if she stays overnight. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Karen, Rita, nice to see your families. Thank you so much. Okay. Nice seeing everyone. Madan Gopal Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Bowing down to Madan Gopal Prabhu. Jai, Jai. Okay, nice seeing everybody. Nice seeing Bhima Prabhu, very handsome. Very handsome Bima Kapoor. Jeffrey Eckler, Susan, Siham, Unlimited Sari, Prashant, Neha, Papi, deities. Okay, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama. We love you. We need you. Come again tomorrow.